Fire every trainer. Alessandro De Santis's voice thundered across the courtyard, startling every pigeon within 3 blocks and freezing a dozen hardened men in perfectly tailored black suits. Nobody moved. Nobody dared. In the center of the training yard, the family's massive black cane Corso stood proudly over the 3 professional handlers he had just dragged through the gravel as if they were children's toys. Torn sleeves, muddy suits, bruised egos. None of it seemed to matter to the enormous dog. He simply yawned, stretched lazily, and looked thoroughly unimpressed. The senior capos exchanged nervous glances. Replacing a bodyguard was easy. Replacing the boss's favorite guard dog, that was another matter entirely. Just as Alessandro looked ready to order another expensive trainer flown in from Europe, the estate gates opened. A slightly out-of-breath woman hurried inside, carrying a faded backpack decorated with tiny embroidered paw prints. She blinked at the intimidating mansion. Then at the men dressed like they belonged in an action movie. Finally, she looked at the enormous growling dog. "Oh," she said cheerfully, "who's my grumpy baby?" 5 seconds later, the terrifying guardian of the De Santis Empire rolled onto his back, exposing his stomach and wagging his tail with complete happiness. Silence swallowed the estate. How had the city's most feared guard dog fallen hopelessly in love with a plus-size dog walker carrying homemade liver treats? No one, not even Alessandro De Santis, had the slightest idea. Earlier that same morning, Daisy Harper had already been running 43 minutes behind schedule. She blamed a stubborn beagle. The beagle blamed a squirrel. The squirrel blamed absolutely nobody. Life, Daisy often believed, had a strange sense of humor. At 31 years old, she balanced 3 different part-time jobs with the determination of someone who had stopped expecting life to become easier years ago. She walked dogs before breakfast, worked afternoons at a neighborhood pet supply store, spent evenings assisting at a small veterinary clinic whenever they needed an extra pair of hands. Every paycheck disappeared almost immediately. Not because she lived extravagantly. Quite the opposite. Months before her mother's passing, they had rescued animals no one else wanted: old dogs, abandoned puppies, injured strays, retired service animals. Saving them had left behind a mountain of veterinary bills Daisy refused to ignore. They deserved love, she always said, whenever friends questioned why she worked so much. So the bills deserved to get paid. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But every morning began with wagging tails. That made everything worthwhile. Her phone buzzed. A scheduling notification flashed across the screen. New client. Emergency behavior consultation. Large breed. Excellent pay. Private security estate. She frowned. Private security company? Her regular dispatcher had accidentally attached the wrong address after 2 appointments were switched that morning. Daisy shrugged. A dog is a dog. 15 minutes later, she arrived at towering iron gates, guarded by men wearing black suits and earpieces. She smiled brightly. "Hi." The guards looked at one another. One quietly pressed a button. Another whispered into his microphone. "Ah." Daisy glanced behind herself. "Is someone famous visiting?" The guards didn't answer. They simply opened the gates. "Fancy security company," Daisy murmured, while walking inside. "Must have really expensive office equipment." Inside the estate, Alessandro watched the newcomer approach from the balcony. "This is the replacement?" one capo whispered. Apparently. She brought dog toys? Indeed she had. Colorful rope toys peeked from one side of her backpack. A squeaky duck protruded from another. One elderly capo sighed. "We're all going to die." Alessandro remained expressionless. He had seen internationally recognized animal behaviorists fail. Former military trainers fail. Police K9 specialists fail. If this woman failed too, At least she looked too kind to blame. His dog certainly wouldn't agree. The massive cane corso immediately lunged forward with a thunderous bark. Several guards instinctively reached for their weapons. Daisy did something completely unexpected. She sat down, right there, on the gravel, cross-legged, ignoring every frightened face around her. She opened her backpack. Not to pull out a leash, not a training collar, not any complicated equipment. Instead, she produced a small cloth bag. The rich smell of homemade beef treats drifted across the courtyard. The dog's ears twitched. Daisy tilted her head. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice softened. "You're exhausted, aren't you?" Another growl. She nodded sympathetically. "I know." A few more seconds passed. "You've had strangers shouting at you all week." The dog stopped barking. "You don't know them." Silence. "They don't know you." The giant animal slowly lowered his head. Around the courtyard, several capos stared, as though they were witnessing black magic. Daisy smiled gently. I wouldn't trust them either. The dog's tail gave one cautious thump. She didn't move closer. She didn't demand obedience. She simply tossed one treat several feet away. The dog sniffed it, ate it, then looked back. Another treat landed closer. Then another. Within moments, the enormous guardian calmly walked toward her on his own. When he finally reached her, Daisy offered the last treat from her open palm. Instead of snapping, he carefully licked her hand. "Oh," she giggled. "You're actually very polite." Without hesitation, she scratched behind one floppy ear. The impossible happened. The giant cane corso leaned into the touch with a deep, contented sigh. One bodyguard accidentally dropped his sunglasses. Another quietly crossed himself. An elderly capo whispered, "I've known that dog for 6 years. He has never sighed. Not once." Alessandro descended the stone staircase without taking his eyes off the unbelievable scene. The dog noticed him. Normally, he would immediately run to his master. Today, he remained sitting beside Daisy, leaning comfortably against her shoulder. Alessandro stopped only a few feet away. The woman looked up. "Oh," she smiled warmly. "You must own the security company." For the first time in years, no one spoke to Alessandro De Santis as though he were an ordinary businessman. He almost corrected her. Almost. Instead, he asked quietly, "And what do you think of my employee?" She glanced at the dog. "Oh, he's wonderful. He just thinks everyone expects him to perform instead of listening." Several capos looked at one another. Had she just psychoanalyzed the boss's attack dog? The funniest part, she wasn't wrong. The cane corso gently rested his massive head in Daisy's lap, then closed his eyes. Alessandro stared at the sight, his most loyal protector. The dog who trusted almost nobody. The animal who had terrified every professional trainer money could buy. Completely asleep, in the lap of a woman who still believed she was visiting a very serious security company. For the first time in a long time, Alessandro De Santis felt something far more dangerous than fear. Curiosity. And somewhere behind him, several capos silently realized the exact same thing. Nothing inside the De Santis empire would ever be quite the same again. By sunrise the next morning, the entire De Santis estate had accepted one astonishing truth. The giant cane corso had made his decision. The cheerful dog walker was staying. Whether anyone else approved seemed completely irrelevant. Alessandro stood in his office overlooking the courtyard while his most trusted capos gathered around the conference table. Normally, their morning meetings revolved around shipping routes, financial reports, political negotiations, and security intelligence. Today, nobody could stop talking about the dog. "I still think he's pretending," one capo muttered. Another shook his head. "I watched Bruno let her clean his paws. The room fell silent. Cleaning Bruno's paws had previously required 4 handlers, 2 muzzles, and a great deal of courage. One veteran bodyguard sighed dramatically. "I've worked for the boss for 12 years. The dog likes her more than he likes any of us." Alessandro calmly closed the folder in front of him. Her name. Everyone looked toward him. What? Her name is Daisy. The room exchanged meaningful glances. The boss remembered the dog walker's name after meeting her once. Interesting. Very interesting. One older capo quietly slid a $20 bill across the table. "I give him 3 days. Another placed down 50. I say tomorrow." "For what?" asked a younger guard. The old man smiled knowingly. Before the boss invents an excuse to hire her. Meanwhile, Daisy had absolutely no idea she had become the main topic of discussion inside one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the East Coast. She arrived carrying 2 reusable grocery bags. One contained grooming supplies. The other held freshly baked peanut butter dog biscuits, shaped like little bones. The guards at the gate recognized her immediately. One even smiled. That alone shocked everyone. "Good morning," Daisy waved. "I made extras." She held up the bag. "For your security employee." The guard bit his lip to stop laughing. "Our security employee has been waiting." As if hearing her voice, Bruno exploded through the courtyard doors. His massive paws thundered across the stone path. Several new employees instinctively ducked for cover. Instead of attacking, the enormous dog skidded to a stop in front of Daisy before bouncing excitedly like an oversized puppy. She laughed. "Oh my goodness! Did somebody miss me?" Bruno answered by leaning all 160 pounds against her. She nearly lost her balance. "Sir," one guard spoke quietly into his earpiece. "He's smiling again." Another whispered, "I didn't know dogs that size could smile." Alessandro watched everything from the balcony. He wasn't smiling. Not exactly. But the corners of his mouth had certainly forgotten how to remain completely straight. His advisor noticed. Then immediately looked away, pretending not to see the boss looking happy. Seemed like the safest career choice. Later that morning, Alessandro found Daisy brushing Bruno beneath a large oak tree. She hummed softly while working through the dog's thick coat. Bruno lay completely relaxed, with one enormous paw resting across her shoe. "You've known him less than 24 hours, Alessandro said. She looked up brightly. "Oh, hello." Then she accidentally blurted, "Your employee has separation anxiety." Silence. One nearby bodyguard coughed, so violently he nearly choked. Alessandro paused. "Employee?" She nodded sincerely. "He acts very confident. But whenever you walk away, he watches the door." She scratched Bruno beneath the chin. Classic emotional attachment. Bruno immediately looked toward Alessandro, then back at Daisy, almost as if proving her point. She smiled proudly. "See?" Alessandro glanced at the dog, then at Daisy. He had spent years studying rivals, politicians, negotiators, and law enforcement officials. Nobody had ever analyzed his guard dog in under 30 seconds. Especially not correctly. "You understand animals." "I listen," Daisy answered simply. "They usually tell you everything." That afternoon, Alessandro made an unexpected announcement. "I want Miss Harper here for 1 week." No one questioned the order. Not allowed. Inside, however, the betting pool tripled. Officially, Daisy had been hired to continue Bruno's rehabilitation. Unofficially, Alessandro found himself inventing reasons to walk past the kennel several times each day. Sometimes he asked about Bruno's diet, sometimes about exercise, sometimes absolutely nothing. He simply stood nearby, while Daisy chatted endlessly with the dog. And then Mr. Pickles stole an entire birthday cake. Bruno tilted his head. "I know. It was chocolate. I yelled too. One bodyguard whispered, "Who's Mr. Pickles?" Another answered, "A dachshund." Apparently, they listened anyway. By Wednesday, something extraordinary had happened. Men feared across 3 states had begun scheduling suspiciously frequent inspections near the kennel. One capo appeared carrying paperwork. Another claimed he was checking surveillance cameras. Someone else insisted he was conducting routine perimeter security. Every excuse sounded worse than the last. In reality, they simply wanted to hear Daisy tell another story. So the Chihuahua believed he was secretly a wolf. Several enormous men laughed so hard, coffee nearly came out of their noses. "You made that up." "I wish I had." He challenged a German shepherd. What happened? The German shepherd apologized. Even Alessandro laughed. Just once. Quietly. Unfortunately, everyone heard it. The entire kennel froze. The boss had laughed. One younger guard slowly whispered, "I didn't know he could." Word spread through headquarters faster than any security alert. The boss had smiled, then laughed. Twice. Employees suddenly volunteered for assignments near the gardens. The atmosphere inside the estate shifted almost imperceptibly. People greeted one another. Kitchen staff baked extra pastries. The gardeners received compliments. Even Bruno seemed determined to introduce Daisy to every employee he liked, which, surprisingly, was becoming almost everyone. Late Thursday afternoon, Daisy noticed Alessandro standing alone near the training grounds. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. She approached carefully. "Long day?" "I've had worse. I've had days where 6 Labradors escaped at once." He blinked. "I don't think that's comparable. You'd be surprised." She smiled. "They all found a muddy pond." For reasons Alessandro couldn't explain, he wanted to know how the story ended. So I jumped in after them, wearing new shoes. And my shoes never recovered. He looked at her for several quiet seconds. "You laughed anyway." She shrugged. It already happened. Might as well laugh. That simple sentence stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Because somewhere during years filled with negotiations, betrayals and impossible decisions, he had forgotten people could think like that. That evening, Bruno refused to sleep inside his luxurious kennel. Instead, he planted himself outside Daisy's small guest cottage. The guards tried coaxing him away. Nothing worked. Finally, Alessandro walked over. "Bruno." The dog opened one eye, then deliberately turned his head away. One guard whispered, "I think." He ignored the boss. "I think he absolutely did." At that exact moment, Daisy opened her cottage door, carrying a blanket. "Oh dear, you've started camping." Bruno wagged enthusiastically. She covered him with the blanket, despite the fact he barely fit beneath it. "There, much better." Bruno sighed happily. Alessandro stared at the ridiculous scene. The estate's most feared guardian, tucked into bed like an oversized child. His own staff struggled to hide their laughter. For the first time in many years, the DeSantis estate sounded less like a fortress and more like a home. Alessandro looked toward the softly lit cottage window, where Daisy was already preparing tomorrow's homemade treats. He told himself he had hired her because Bruno needed her. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asked a dangerous question. Was Bruno truly the only one who looked forward to seeing her every morning? Alessandro had no answer, and that uncertainty unsettled him far more than any enemy ever had. Friday morning began with an argument, not between rival Mafia families, not between politicians, not even between Alessandro and one of his notoriously stubborn capos. It was between Alessandro and Bruno. Neither one of them seemed willing to admit it. The disagreement started when Daisy walked into the courtyard, carrying a fresh basket of homemade treats. "Good morning, handsome." Bruno bounded toward her before Alessandro had a chance to say a single word. The giant, Cane Corso, sat directly in front of Daisy, lifting one enormous paw with theatrical precision. "Oh?" she smiled. "Someone wants attention." She scratched behind his ears. Bruno groaned with happiness. Alessandro cleared his throat. "Daisy." She looked up. "Oh, good morning." Before she could walk over, Bruno casually shifted sideways, placing his entire body between them. The movement looked innocent, completely accidental, except every guard watching knew exactly what the dog had done. One bodyguard whispered, "He blocked the boss." Another nodded. Again. Alessandro stepped to one side. Bruno mirrored him. Daisy frowned. "I think he wants to play." A veteran capo nearly laughed out loud. "Play?" "Number." The dog was guarding something. Or rather, someone. Alessandro folded his arms. "Bruno." The dog looked at him, then deliberately leaned harder against Daisy's legs. Several guards suddenly found the pavement extremely interesting. Looking at the boss during this moment felt unnecessarily dangerous. Over the next several days, the strange competition became impossible to ignore. Whenever Alessandro invited Daisy to discuss Bruno's progress, Bruno arrived first. If Alessandro sat beside her during lunch, Bruno squeezed his enormous body onto the bench between them. If Alessandro complimented Daisy's work, Bruno barked, as if demanding equal recognition. Even Daisy found the behavior amusing. "I think he's worried someone might steal me," one capo muttered under his breath. "He's not the only one." The betting pool exploded. Every afternoon, bodyguards quietly gathered in the security office, not to discuss surveillance, to update the scoreboard. Who is more jealous? Bruno or the boss. Current odds. Bruno, 3-1. Boss, 2-1. One young recruit looked horrified. "Are we really gambling on this?" The veteran beside him shrugged. "We've survived shootouts. This is considerably more dangerous." Later that afternoon, Daisy found Alessandro standing outside the indoor training hall. He appeared unusually thoughtful. "Everything okay?" she asked. "I've been informed my dog has developed..." He paused. "Certain habits." She blinked. "Oh, you mean the leaning?" "The leaning? That's what I call it." She smiled. When dogs trust someone completely, they sometimes lean against them. She demonstrated by gently pressing her shoulder against Bruno. The giant dog instantly leaned back. "See? It's like a hug." Alessandro watched quietly. "I've never seen him do that. He probably never felt safe enough." The words settled heavily in the air. Not because they criticized Alessandro. They didn't. Daisy spoke without judgment, only kindness. She always seemed to believe every frightened creature had a reason, even if nobody else understood it. That evening, heavy rain covered the estate. Most employees hurried indoors. Daisy, however, sat beneath the kennel awning drying Bruno with oversized towels while talking non-stop. And then the kitten adopted the Saint Bernard. Bruno stared attentively. "I know. It makes absolutely no sense. But neither does pineapple on pizza." Alessandro arrived carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I thought you might be cold." "Oh." She looked genuinely surprised. "Thank you." As she reached for the cup, her sleeve caught one of Bruno's toys. The squeaky duck flew into the air. Without thinking, Alessandro caught it. There was a long silence. The feared Mafia boss now stood holding a bright yellow squeaky duck. A bodyguard passing nearby froze. Another quietly walked backward to avoid laughing. Daisy bit her lip. "I'm sorry. I usually only embarrass myself." Alessandro looked down at the toy. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he squeezed it. Squeak. The ridiculous sound echoed through the rainy courtyard. Bruno barked excitedly. Daisy burst into uncontrollable laughter. Real laughter. The kind that arrived before permission. Alessandro stared at her for a moment. Then, despite himself, he laughed too. It was softer than hers, but genuine. For several seconds, the rain, the estate, and the burdens of leadership seemed impossibly far away. Unfortunately, someone else witnessed everything. Vanessa Caldwell lowered the tinted window of her luxury sedan as it entered the estate. She had spent months organizing charity galas for the DeSantis Foundation. Elegant, intelligent, beautifully composed. She understood high society perfectly. She had also quietly imagined herself becoming Mrs. Alessandro DeSantis someday. The future seemed obvious, until now. She watched Alessandro standing in the rain, holding coffee, holding a squeaky duck, while smiling at the dog walker. Vanessa frowned. "Who is she?" The chauffeur answered carefully.
"Miss Daisy Harper."
The woman caring for Bruno. Vanessa's expression hardened. A temporary employee. So I've heard. She watched Bruno happily resting against Daisy. Then she noticed something even stranger. Alessandro wasn't watching the dog anymore. He was watching Daisy laugh. Vanessa recognized that look immediately. It wasn't fascination. It wasn't curiosity. It was the beginning of affection. And affection changed powerful men. She couldn't allow that. Over the following days, Vanessa made every effort to remind Alessandro of their scheduled meetings, fundraising dinners, museum partnerships, political receptions, luxury charity auctions. He attended. He listened. He signed every necessary document. Yet each meeting ended the same way. Anything else? No. Then I'd like to check on Bruno. Vanessa forced a smile. Of course. But every time he walked away, he wasn't really checking on Bruno. He was checking whether Daisy had remembered to eat lunch, whether she needed anything for the rescue dogs she still volunteered with, whether the estate kitchen had prepared meals she actually enjoyed. The staff noticed. The capos noticed. Even Bruno noticed. Whenever Alessandro arrived carrying snacks or coffee, the giant dog proudly inserted himself between them before accepting half the treats. One afternoon, Alessandro sighed dramatically. "I feed him." One nearby guard pretended to study the clouds. "I pay for him." Another suddenly became fascinated by his own shoes. Alessandro watched Bruno receive another warm hug from Daisy. Why does he get all the cuddles? The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then every nearby bodyguard scattered in different directions before anyone accidentally laughed in front of the boss. Unfortunately, they laughed the moment they reached the hallway. The story spread through headquarters within minutes. By evening, even the kitchen staff knew. The boss was jealous of his own dog. Vanessa heard that story too. Unlike everyone else, she didn't laugh. The May. She stood alone inside the ballroom where the foundation's annual charity gala was being prepared. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Hundreds of guests would soon arrive. Politicians, judges, business leaders, media executives. It would be the perfect place to reinforce her importance beside Alessandro. Unless that cheerful dog walker remained part of his daily life. Vanessa slowly traced one finger across an antique silver music box displayed in a glass cabinet. A priceless family heirloom, protected by discreet security cameras. An idea quietly formed. Not cruel enough to seem unbelievable, just believable enough to destroy someone's reputation. She smiled at her reflection in the glass. If Miss Harper leaves on her own, no one will blame me. Outside, Bruno suddenly lifted his head and stared toward the mansion. Dogs often sensed danger long before people did. This time, He wasn't watching an enemy approach the estate. He was watching one quietly emerge from within it. By Monday morning, Daisy had stopped counting how many people greeted her by name. The gardeners waved whenever she crossed the courtyard. Kitchen staff tucked fresh muffins into her backpack for later. Even the accountants, who normally hurried through the hallways without making eye contact, slowed down long enough to ask whether Bruno had enjoyed his new toy. The estate no longer felt like an intimidating fortress. It felt strangely alive. Daisy assumed everyone had simply become friendlier. She never realized she had been the reason. Not everyone welcomed the change. Vanessa Caldwell watched it happen with growing frustration. Everywhere she looked, employees were smiling. Bodyguards were laughing. The boss lingered in conversations that had nothing to do with business. Worst of all, whenever Daisy entered a room, Alessandro's attention followed almost automatically. Vanessa had spent years mastering elegant conversation, perfect etiquette, perfect timing, perfect appearances. Yet somehow, the woman who accidentally spilled dog treats across marble floors attracted more genuine affection than all of Vanessa's carefully rehearsed charm. That wasn't acceptable. Late Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa quietly stepped into the family gallery. The antique silver music box rested inside its illuminated display case. It had belonged to Alessandro's grandmother. Its sentimental value exceeded its price. Vanessa glanced toward the hallway. Empty. She discreetly opened the display, using the temporary access code she had been given while planning the upcoming charity gala. Removing the music box took less than 5 seconds. Hiding it inside a storage cabinet behind stacks of decorative linens took another 10. Then, she smiled. Step 1 was complete. The following morning, the mansion erupted into confusion. The music box is gone. Servants searched every hallway. Security reviewed guest logs. Senior capos questioned staff members. Nobody understood how an item protected inside the private gallery could simply disappear. Vanessa waited patiently. Then she spoke with carefully measured concern. I hate saying this. Every eye turned toward her. But Miss Harper was cleaning Bruno after he wandered through the gallery yesterday. Silence settled over the room. One servant immediately protested. Miss Harper would never. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm, Vanessa interrupted gently. Perhaps she admired it. Perhaps she planned to return it. The suggestion sounded polite, reasonable, dangerously believable. Within an hour, the rumor had spread through the estate. Nobody wanted to believe it. Yet uncertainty quietly replaced confidence. Daisy noticed the change immediately. People still smiled, but not quite as warmly. Conversations stopped when she approached. She looked around in confusion. Did I do something wrong? No one answered. Finally, Alessandro asked to see her. She entered his office carrying Bruno's leash, completely unaware of what awaited her. You wanted to see me? His expression remained calm. Too calm. There has been... He chose his words carefully. An accusation. Her smile faded. Against me? A valuable family heirloom has disappeared. She blinked several times. Oh? I hope you find it. The sincerity in her voice nearly made Alessandro dismiss the entire conversation. Then duty intervened. Were you in the gallery yesterday? Only because Bruno chased a butterfly. She smiled awkwardly. He lost. Despite everything, the corner of Alessandro's mouth almost moved. Almost. Daisy, did someone think I took it? Her voice became very small. He hated hearing it. I have to investigate every possibility. She nodded slowly. I understand. No anger, no outrage, only disappointment. Somehow, that hurt even more. An hour later, Daisy quietly packed her backpack inside the guest cottage. She folded Bruno's favorite blanket, washed his food bowls one final time. labeled every container of homemade treats with simple instructions: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. She even included little handwritten notes. Tell Bruno he's the bravest boy. Please don't let him eat socks. He only pretends not to like baths. Tears blurred her handwriting. I don't want anyone thinking I caused trouble, she whispered to herself. Mr. DeSantis has enough problems already. So she made the decision she always made whenever life became complicated. She would leave, quietly, without asking anyone to defend her. Bruno realized something was wrong, long before anyone else. Dogs noticed suitcases, different smells, the sound of quiet crying. As Daisy zipped her backpack closed, Bruno placed his enormous head against her shoulder. She hugged him tightly. I'm going home, sweetheart. You'll be okay, he whined. No, she smiled through tears. You'll make new friends, he answered, by planting himself directly in front of the cottage door. She laughed softly. You're too big to be dramatic. He didn't move. She tried stepping around him. He shifted with her. She stepped left. He stepped left. She stepped right. He stepped right. You are absolutely impossible. Outside, 2 bodyguards approached. The boss asked us to escort Miss Harper. One opened the cottage door. Bruno stood. A deep growl rolled through the room. Nobody moved. The guards looked at one another. I'll go first. You absolutely will not. Bruno's massive body blocked the entire doorway. Not aggressively. Protectively. He wasn't threatening Daisy. He was refusing to let her leave. Word reached Alessandro within minutes. Sir, one guard hesitated. Bruno won't allow anyone near Miss Harper. Alessandro immediately walked toward the guest cottage. By the time he arrived, half the security team had gathered outside. No one had crossed the doorway. Inside, Daisy sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Bruno's neck. It's okay, she whispered. They're not mad at you. The giant dog rested his chin on her knee, refusing to budge. Alessandro stepped inside alone. Bruno, the dog looked at him. For the first time in years, the loyal guardian ignored a direct command. Bruno, nothing. Only another low whine, almost pleading. Daisy looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I think he believes if I leave. She swallowed hard. I'm never coming back. Alessandro stared at the scene before him. The dog he had raised. The woman who had transformed the estate. The packed backpack resting beside the bed. Something tightened painfully inside his chest. Until that moment, he had convinced himself he was simply protecting the investigation, maintaining order, doing what any responsible leader would do. But watching Daisy quietly prepare to disappear from his life, he understood a truth he had been avoiding. Bruno wasn't the only one terrified of losing her. He was. Outside, the capos waited in uneasy silence. One elderly advisor quietly spoke. Sir? Alessandro never looked away from Daisy. Review every security recording from the last 72 hours. The entire estate. No exceptions. The advisor nodded immediately. And if the accusation is false, Alessandro's voice became cold enough to freeze the room. Then, someone has mistaken kindness. He glanced toward Daisy. For weakness. That would be an unforgettable mistake. Across the courtyard, Vanessa watched from an upstairs balcony. She saw Alessandro remain inside the cottage far longer than expected. She saw Bruno refuse to leave Daisy's side. She saw senior investigators rushing toward the security office. For the first time since beginning her plan, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She had expected Daisy to leave. She had not expected Alessandro to move the entire weight of the DeSantis empire to uncover the truth. And deep inside the security control room, Dozens of surveillance monitors were already replaying every second of footage from the previous 3 days. Somewhere among thousands of recorded moments, one camera had captured exactly what really happened. It was only a matter of time before the truth found its way into the light. 3 days later, the DeSantis Foundation's annual charity gala glittered brighter than ever. Crystal chandeliers bathed the ballroom in warm golden light. Politicians mingled with judges. CEOs exchanged business cards with philanthropists. Representatives from rival families offered carefully rehearsed smiles while pretending decades of rivalry had never existed. Everything looked flawless, exactly as Vanessa Caldwell had planned. She wore an elegant emerald gown and greeted every guest with effortless confidence. No one would have guessed she had spent the previous 72 hours quietly hoping one woman would disappear forever. Across the ballroom, however, Alessandro seemed distracted. His attention kept drifting toward the entrance. He had personally asked Daisy to attend, not because appearances required it, because he wanted her there. Even after investigators had recovered the missing silver music box hidden inside a storage cabinet. Even after security footage had revealed every step of Vanessa's deception. He hadn't confronted anyone immediately. Not yet. Truth, he believed, deserved witnesses. Tonight, the entire room would become one. When Daisy finally entered the ballroom, conversation softened almost instantly. She wore a simple navy blue dress she had almost decided not to buy years earlier. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to attract attention. She still looked slightly uncomfortable, wearing formal shoes, still carried herself with the same gentle humility, still smiled nervously whenever someone complimented her. She leaned toward Alessandro as he greeted her. "I think I might be underdressed." He looked at her for a long moment. "No." His voice was quiet. "I think everyone else simply overdressed." She laughed. The sound eased a tension inside him that he hadn't realized he was carrying. Bruno, wearing an elegant black collar with a silver bow tie, proudly walked beside them. Several guests immediately abandoned conversations with politicians in favor of greeting the giant dog. Bruno accepted the admiration with remarkable dignity, until Daisy scratched behind his ears. Then he melted into a happy puddle of wagging tail and oversized affection. The room laughed. Even seasoned diplomats couldn't help smiling. Vanessa watched everything unfold. This was her moment. If Daisy remained admired, everything Vanessa had carefully built would crumble. She lifted her champagne glass and gently tapped it with a silver spoon. The ballroom quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," she smiled gracefully. "Before tonight's fundraising begins, I believe transparency is important." Several guests nodded. Vanessa turned toward Daisy. "There has been an unfortunate incident involving a treasured DeSantis family heirloom." DeSantis. The room became still. "I find it deeply regrettable that someone welcomed into this home," she paused dramatically, "would choose to repay that kindness with theft." Dozens of eyes shifted toward Daisy. Daisy's smile disappeared. She instinctively lowered her gaze. The familiar feeling returned. The one she had carried most of her life, whenever strangers assumed the worst, before hearing the truth. She opened her mouth, then quietly closed it again. She had never enjoyed defending herself. Before another word could be spoken, Alessandro stepped forward. "You're right," his calm voice echoed across the silent ballroom. "Transparency is important." Vanessa smiled, believing he agreed. He didn't even glance at her. Instead, he nodded toward the large projection screen prepared for the evening's presentation. "Play the recording." The ballroom lights dimmed. Security footage appeared. The timestamp clearly displayed the previous Tuesday afternoon. Every guest watched as Vanessa entered the family gallery alone. They watched her unlock the display case, remove the silver music box, walk calmly into the storage room, hide it behind decorative linens, then leave as though nothing had happened. Silence became absolute. No one breathed. No one whispered. Vanessa stared at the screen in complete disbelief. Her voice trembled. I can explain. No. Alessandro's answer remained perfectly controlled. You cannot. Two members of the security team quietly stepped beside her. She looked desperately around the ballroom. No one met her eyes. The image she had spent years creating disappeared in less than 2 minutes. Not because Alessandro humiliated her, because the truth spoke for itself. As she was escorted away, the only sound in the ballroom came from Bruno. One satisfied bark, almost as if announcing that justice had finally arrived. The room remained silent. Every guest now looked toward Daisy. She stood frozen, not triumphant, not vindictive, only overwhelmed. She whispered. I never wanted anyone to get into trouble because of me. Alessandro slowly walked toward her. Every step felt strangely personal, despite the hundreds of witnesses surrounding them. He stopped beside Bruno. The giant dog immediately sat between them, looking proudly from one face to the other. Alessandro knelt. Several politicians exchanged puzzled looks. The feared Mafia boss, kneeling in the middle of a charity gala, he gently scratched behind Bruno's ears. My friend. Bruno wagged enthusiastically. I need to ask your permission. Soft laughter spread through the ballroom. Alessandro looked toward Daisy. If I promise not to steal all your cuddles. He smiled. Would you stay anyway? Daisy blinked rapidly as tears filled her eyes. She laughed through them. Only Daisy could cry and laugh at exactly the same moment. She looked down at Bruno. Well, she wiped her cheeks. I suppose that depends. She gently cupped the dog's face. Do you approve? Bruno answered with one joyful bark, loud enough to echo through the ballroom. The guests burst into warm applause. Even rival family leaders found themselves smiling. One elderly judge quietly remarked, That's probably the most honest approval process I've ever witnessed. Laughter rolled through the room once again. Daisy looked back at Alessandro. This means, she teased softly, I'll have to share him. Alessandro glanced at Bruno. He sighed dramatically. I've been sharing him all week. The bodyguards finally gave up, pretending to remain professional. They laughed harder than anyone. Months passed. Spring slowly transformed the DeSantis estate. The unused southern gardens became something entirely new. Rows of comfortable kennels replaced abandoned storage buildings. Wide grassy fields stretched across the property. Retired police dogs. Abandoned puppies. Senior rescue animals. Injured strays. Every creature that had once been overlooked now had a safe place to recover. The project operated through the DeSantis Foundation, but everyone knew whose dream had inspired it. Daisy never asked for a grand office. Instead, she requested larger play areas, better medical equipment, extra volunteers. She insisted every frightened animal deserved patience before obedience. Alessandro approved every request without negotiation. His accountants stopped asking questions. It was easier that way. Life inside headquarters changed too. Capos still discussed business. Security teams still trained every morning. Meetings still started precisely on time. But now, fresh dog treats permanently occupied one corner of the conference room. No one questioned it. New employees quickly learned an unusual tradition. If you wanted to meet the boss unexpectedly, bring treats. Bruno would find you. And wherever Bruno went, Daisy usually wasn't far behind. One sunny afternoon, a newly recruited bodyguard walked across the gardens with an older veteran. He stopped in surprise. Under a large oak tree, Bruno slept peacefully with his enormous head resting in Daisy's lap. She quietly read a rescue magazine while absent-mindedly rubbing one floppy ear. A few feet away, Alessandro stood patiently, holding 2 cups of coffee. He noticed both of them sleeping. Instead of waking them, he simply waited, completely content. The young recruit whispered, "So, who's really in charge around here?" The veteran chuckled. "The boss runs the empire." He nodded toward the peaceful scene beneath the tree. "But she runs the boss." As if agreeing with the statement, Bruno opened one eye, wagged his tail once, and returned to sleep. Alessandro smiled. Daisy looked up. Their eyes met. No dramatic speeches were necessary. No grand declarations remained unfinished. Some people changed the world with power. Others changed it with kindness. Daisy Harper never became someone different to earn love. She simply remained exactly who she had always been, a warm-hearted woman who spoke to every dog like an old friend, believed broken souls deserved second chances, and accidentally reminded an entire Mafia empire that strength and gentleness were never opposites. Sometimes, the safest place in the most dangerous empire wasn't behind armed guards. It was beside a woman with dog treats in her backpack, and that became everyone's favorite story to tell.